There are days I walk into my courtroom knowing, before a single file is opened, that something will happen I will not forget. This was one of those days, and the boy who came through those double doors alone, carrying nothing but a folded piece of paper, sits with me still every time I pour my morning coffee. If you have ever watched someone carry a weight so old it has become part of their posture, I need you to stay with me for every word of this story. Have you ever walked into a room and known, down in your bones, that a stranger was holding something enormous that the rest of the world had completely missed? Because that is exactly what happened in my courtroom on a gray Tuesday morning, and I believe you are exactly the right person to hear it. It was March 4th, cold and damp outside, the kind of cold that sits on your shoulders like a second coat. I had pulled into the parking lot at Hargrove Municipal Court, 115 Meridian Avenue at 7:14 a.m. The flag above the steps was hanging perfectly still. Still air on court days always makes me pay attention. Hargrove is not a glamorous building. Pale green tile floors, dark oak benches worn smooth from decades of nervous hands, and a fluorescent light above Sandra's clerk station that has hummed at the same pitch for 11 years. I have asked 3 maintenance supervisors to fix it. They never do. I had 17 cases on the docket that morning. Case number 9 was listed as State versus Ashford. Fraud, financial exploitation of a minor, misuse of estate funds. On paper, it looked like a civil matter dressed in criminal clothing. In practice, it was the story of a boy who had been alone in the world since he was 10 years old and had finally decided at 16 that silence had cost him enough. Garrison Tyler Ashford walked into my courtroom at 9:51 a.m. wearing a suit that cost more than most people in that gallery made in a month. Navy blue, perfectly pressed, a white shirt with a collar so crisp it looked architectural. His Hermes belt was tan with a gold H buckle, and his Rolex Oyster Perpetual caught the fluorescent light when he lifted his hand to smooth his tie. He was 44 years old, and he moved through that room like a man who had never once been told no by anything that truly mattered. His attorney, Clifford Baines, walked half a step behind him carrying a leather briefcase that matched the belt. They sat at the defense table, and Garrison Ashford looked around my courtroom the way tourists look at airports, mildly inconvenienced, mildly bored. I have seen that look thousands of times. It is the look of a man who believes rooms like this one exist for other people. He ran a real estate company called Ashford Group Properties with offices on North Palmetto Drive. His firm had a website with photographs of him in open-collar shirts, standing in front of expensive buildings and 47,000 social media followers. He had a Porsche Cayenne in the metered lot outside, which I know because my bailiff, Officer Torres, mentioned it while checking the vehicle registry log that morning. None of that is a crime, but all of it tells you something about a person's relationship with consequence. Marcus Cole Webb sat in the gallery on the other side of the room. He was 16 years old, and he had come to that courthouse completely alone. No parent, no guardian, no advocate beside him with a legal pad. He wore a gray hoodie washed so many times the drawstrings had frayed at the tips. His sneakers were clean but old, the kind of old where you can see the effort behind it. He worked part-time at a gas station on Elmwood Road 3 afternoons a week and gave most of what he earned to his grandmother for household expenses. He sat with both hands in his lap and eyes forward, and he did not look at Garrison Ashford once when Ashford walked in. When someone truly fears another person, they do not turn to look at them when they enter a room. They already know exactly where that person is. Marcus Cole Webb had been 10 years old when his father, Leonard James Webb, was killed in a hit-and-run accident on Carver Street on the night of September 11, 2018. His mother, Denise Webb, had died of ovarian cancer 14 months before that. Leonard Webb had a life insurance policy worth $312,000 and a modest home at 44402 Carver Street with $88,000 in equity. He had made a will leaving everything to his son, held in trust by a named trustee until Marcus turned 18. The named trustee was Garrison Tyler Ashford. The two men had been acquaintances from a church men's group on Brentwood Boulevard. Not close friends, not family, the kind of neighbors who wave from across a street. My father once told me that people choose trustees the way they choose doctors, not because they know the person deeply, because at one specific moment in time, the person looks trustworthy. And looking trustworthy was something Garrison Ashford had spent his whole life perfecting. After Leonard died, Marcus went to live with his grandmother, Ruth Webb, who was 65 at the time and working part-time at a dry cleaning shop on Fletcher Avenue. Ruth was a quiet woman with arthritic hands and a deep sense of dignity. The trust documents set monthly disbursements at $2,400 to cover Marcus's care and schooling. In the 6 years between Leonard Webb's death and the morning Marcus walked into my courtroom, Ruth Webb had received a total of $11,200, not $2,400 per month for 72 months, $11,200, spread unevenly, sometimes nothing for 4 months at a time. Every time Ruth called Ashford Group Properties, the receptionist said Mr. Ashford was unavailable. Every letter she sent came back as a form reply about market fluctuations written in language designed to confuse someone who had never read a trust document in her life. Marcus Webb found the truth on his own. He found the original trust documents in an envelope in his grandmother's bedroom drawer. He looked up property records online and cross-referenced real estate transactions under Ashford Group Properties against the dates and amounts in the trust ledger. He assembled a folder printed at the public library on Elm Street for Ford 20 and walked into Hargrove Municipal Court by himself to file the complaint that set this case in motion. That folder sat on my bench the evening before this hearing. I read every page at my kitchen table. When I looked up the next morning and saw Marcus sitting alone in the gallery with his frayed hoodie and his hands folded in his lap, I had to press my lips together and breathe through my nose. My father used to say the law is only as good as the people brave enough to use it. Marcus Webb was brave enough. The question was whether the law deserved him. The arraignment had been completed 3 weeks prior. This was the evidentiary hearing. Clifford Baines arrived with a strategy I have seen 100 times. Attack the process, confuse the timeline, make the other side look disorganized before real evidence lands. At 9:52 a.m., 1 minute after the case was called, he filed a motion to dismiss on procedural defect, arguing that as a minor, Marcus lacked standing to file without a licensed adult guardian. He presented it with the kind of smooth theatrical confidence that costs about $400 an hour. Sandra set down her pen and waited. I let him finish. I set down my pen and looked at Clifford Baines directly. I said, "Counsel, are you telling this court that a 16-year-old boy who personally discovered his trust funds had been misappropriated does not have standing to report that to a court of law?" Baines adjusted his glasses and said, "Your Honor, the rules governing minor plaintiffs are quite clear." I said, "And so is the statute governing financial exploitation of a dependent minor." I denied the motion. Garrison Ashford leaned over and said something tight into Baines's ear. Baines gave a very small nod. Detective Sergeant Pamela Okafor, badge 2214, was called to the stand at 10:08 a.m. She was a compact, steady woman with close-cropped natural hair and the particular stillness in the witness chair that comes from 9 years in the Financial Crimes Unit. She testified in plain language. The trust account had been opened in October 2018 with a deposit of $312,000 from the life insurance payout and a second deposit of $76,400 from the net proceeds of the Webb family home sale. The stated purpose of the account was minor child support and educational fund. She paused and looked at her notes. She said the account now held $34,210. The gallery shifted when she said that number. I heard it, that low collective sound of people recalculating something in their heads. Garrison Ashford did not shift. He picked an invisible piece of lint from his sleeve. Detective Okafor continued. Between January 2019 and August 2024, 47 individual withdrawals had been categorized as trust administrative expenses or investment management fees, totaling $246,580. Her unit received documentation for only $18,820. The remaining $228,160 had no documentation at all. Sandra logged the certified transaction record as State Exhibit 3. Baines objected twice. I overruled him both times. Each time I did, Garrison Ashford looked at me with the expression of a man deciding between irritated and contemptuous. If you have ever sat in a room while a person's full story of neglect gets laid out as transaction numbers on paper, you know the specific silence that follows. It is not dramatic. It is very quiet. It is the shared understanding that a real human life was treated as a line item. 28 years on this bench, and that silence still finds me every single time. So here's what I want to say to you right now. You think you already see where this is going. I'm going to dare you to stay because what you believe is the worst of it is not even half the full truth yet. I dare you to keep going. The forensic accountant retained by the court was Nadia Singh, 38 years old, precise, methodical, and gifted at translating financial records into plain human language. She testified that she had traced 4 specific large withdrawals from the trust account to 4 corresponding deposits in the Ashford Group Properties operating account, confirmed by wire transfer numbers and matching dates placed on the projector screen at 10:39 a.m. The 4 transactions totaled $211,000. The 4 real estate deals those funds financed returned a combined $584,000 based on county property records. None of that profit had ever been deposited back into Marcus Webb's trust, not $1. Then Nadia Singh said something that changed the temperature of the entire room. Her unit had found 7 payments made between 2020 and 2023 to a private school called Beaumont Academy on Cabot Lane, totaling $89,400, categorized in Ashford Group records as educational consulting expenses. Garrison Tyler Ashford had a son named Preston who attended Beaumont Academy from 2020 to 2023. Marcus Cole Webb attended Garfield Middle School and then Westside High School, both public institutions, on the school lunch assistance program. Marcus Webb's trust account had been charged $89,400 to pay for another child's private education. The gallery went from quiet to very quiet. Even Clifford Baines had stopped writing. I looked at Garrison Ashford. His jaw was still tight, but his posture had shifted slightly forward, like a man who has heard a door close behind him but is not yet ready to admit he is locked in. Officer Torres, near the back wall, shifted his weight from his left foot to his right. Sandra had stopped typing. The only sound for 3 or 4 full seconds was the steady hum of that fluorescent light above her station. During a brief recess at 10:55 a.m., I stepped back into my chambers. When I returned, Officer Torres met me at the door with the quiet expression I have learned to read in 11 years of working together. He said, "Judge, there is a woman in the hallway. She drove 4 hours to be here this morning. She has documents she says are related to this case, and she says she saw something 6 years ago and never spoke about it until today." I told Torres to seat her in the gallery. I sat back down and thought about what my father used to say. He said the cases that read like misdemeanors sometimes have felonies buried underneath them. I had not yet found the bottom of this one, but I could feel it. Court reconvened at 11:07 a.m. The woman from the hallway had taken a seat in the second row of the gallery. She was in her early 50s, wearing a green rain jacket, holding a manila envelope with both hands in her lap. Her name was Carolyn Dumont, 51 years old, a former real estate title clerk who had worked at Hargrove County Title and Escrow on Vine Street from 2014 until 2022. She had driven from Millfield that morning because she had seen the public court filing notice online and recognized the defendant's name. Before I got to her, one more thing had to happen. I asked Clifford Baines whether his client wished to make a statement. Garrison Ashford stood up. He smoothed the front of his jacket. He said with the kind of voice designed to fill a room, "Your Honor, I have spent 6 years managing a complicated trust in good faith for a difficult situation. I did the best I could with limited information." He paused. Then he said, "I think it is worth noting that whoever coached this kid to put together that little library printout did him no favors today. He called Marcus Webb's documentation a library printout. He said it like it was nothing. Marcus Webb did not flinch. He sat in the gallery with his hands in his lap and looked at the middle distance with a stillness so complete it almost hurt to watch. That kind of stillness is not weakness. It is armor, built one dismissal at a time over years. I looked at Garrison Ashford and said, "Mr. Ashford, you will address this court with the same respect you expect from it, and you will refrain from characterizing the evidence or the person who submitted it." He said, "Of course, Your Honor," with a smile that told me he felt no obligation to mean it. A man who smiles in that moment has just shown you his whole hand. I have been in this work long enough to know when a case has more underneath it. I need you to stay right here with me now, because what Carolyn Dumont had inside that manila envelope was something nobody in that courtroom saw coming, and what it meant for Marcus Cole Webb went far deeper than any dollar amount on any ledger. Are you still with me? Because this is the part that changes everything. And once you hear it, you will understand why this case never left me. Carolyn Dumont was sworn in at 11:19 a.m. She testified in a voice that shook slightly at first and then steadied as she went. In October 2018, she had processed the title transfer for the Webb family home at 4402 Carver Street following Leonard Webb's death. While processing that transfer, she had found an anomaly. The title documents submitted to her office showed that Leonard Webb had signed a deed of transfer on the property on August 29, 2018, 13 days before he died. The deed transferred the property directly to Garrison Tyler Ashford, not to the trust, to Ashford personally. I said, and the property was subsequently sold by Mr. Ashford? She said, yes, 17 months later for $164,000. I said, and the proceeds? She said they went into an Ashford Group Properties operating account, not the trust. She said she had flagged the anomaly internally in 2018, and her supervisor reviewed it and told her the deed appeared valid. She had left the company in 2022 and thought about this case every year since. The original flagged file was inside the manila envelope. Sandra logged it as State Exhibit 11. The gallery was completely still. I looked at that document. I looked at the date. August 29, 2018. Leonard James Webb had signed over his family home to Garrison Tyler Ashford 13 days before he was killed in a hit-and-run accident on Carver Street, the same street where the family had lived. I set the document down carefully and gave the room the silence it needed. Clifford Baines had put his pen flat on the table. He did not pick it up again. I asked Baines whether his client disputed the authenticity of the document. He asked for a moment with his client. I gave him 3 minutes. The only sound in that room was that fluorescent light. At 11:34 a.m., a figure I had not seen before walked through the back door of my courtroom. His name was Assistant State Attorney Daniel Reeves from the Financial Crimes Division at the Commonwealth Boulevard Courthouse. He handed Sandra a document. Sandra handed it to me. It was an emergency notice of expanded investigation. Detective Okafor had flagged the deed irregularity to the state attorney's office 2 days prior during her own chain of title review. The notice confirmed a grand jury proceeding was being initiated. A forensic document examiner had reviewed the August 2018 deed signature and found preliminary inconsistencies with known exemplars of Leonard Webb's handwriting. Not confirmed forgery, not yet, but enough to open a door to charges that went far beyond misuse of trust funds. The room understood what that meant without anyone saying it out loud. Garrison Tyler Ashford understood it too. His hand went up and adjusted his Rolex. One small nervous movement that broke through all that polished control in exactly the way nervous habits always do. The whole courtroom saw it. Clifford Baines set his pen flat on the table. He had nothing left to write. I called a 15-minute recess at 11:41 a.m. I walked back into my chambers, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window looking out over the parking lot. I could see the Porsche Cayenne from where I stood. I could see the flag, still hanging perfectly still in the gray March air. I thought about Marcus Webb at 10 years old, losing both parents in 14 months. I thought about Ruth Webb's arthritic hands writing letters that went nowhere. I thought about a deed signed 13 days before a hit and run on the street where a family had once lived. I thought about my father saying the law is not a wall, it is a door, and the people who decide who walks through it carry a responsibility that never goes away. I set the glass down and walked back to the bench. Garrison Tyler Ashford looked different when I returned. The suit and the belt and the watch were all still in place, but something beneath them had changed. He sat slightly forward now instead of slightly back. His hands were flat on the table in front of him, not folded. The hands of a man trying to hold something steady that had already broken loose. Whatever version of this day he had planned for in his mind was gone. I looked at the documents before me, the transaction records, the trust ledger, Carolyn Dumont's flagged title file, the state attorney's notice, and Marcus Webb's folder printed for $4.20s. I looked at Garrison Tyler Ashford and said, this court has before it documented evidence of a pattern of financial exploitation conducted over 6 years against a minor child whose parents were both deceased. This court has also received notification of a parallel investigation into a property transfer that occurred 13 days before that child's father died. What happens at the state level is beyond the scope of this court today. What happens in this room right now is not. He started to speak. I raised my hand. I said, Marcus Cole Webb attended public school on a lunch assistance program while his own trust funds paid for another child's private education. His grandmother wrote letters asking where the money was and received form replies designed to confuse her. Marcus Webb assembled the truth at 16 years old with a public library computer and $4.20. He walked into this courthouse completely alone. He had no lawyer. He had no adult beside him. He had a folder and 6 years of knowing something was wrong. I want everyone in this gallery and everyone who ever hears this story to understand what that kind of courage actually looks like in a person. That is why rooms like this one exist, not for the powerful, for the moment when someone without power decides to show up and trust that justice is real anyway. If you believe that too, then this story does not belong only to me or to Marcus. It belongs to everyone who has ever sat in a waiting room or a gallery hoping that what they were told about fairness was actually true. I tell these stories because of that hope, and because of people like you who stay to listen. I sentenced Garrison Tyler Ashford on 2 counts of financial exploitation of a minor and 1 count of breach of fiduciary duty, full restitution of all documented misappropriated funds totaling $276,500 to be deposited into a court-supervised trust account for Marcus Cole Webb within 90 days. 36 months of supervised probation, permanent surrender of his trustee license, and a lifetime bar from serving in any fiduciary capacity for any minor or dependent adult in this state. 500 hours of community service at a nonprofit financial literacy program serving low-income youth. Monthly certified financial accounting submitted directly to this court for the full duration of the restitution period, not to his attorney, to this court. His reaction was not dramatic. He did not cry. He did not shout. He became very still in a way entirely different from the controlled stillness he had walked in with. This was the stillness of a man standing at the edge of what he had done and finding he could no longer look away from it. Clifford Baines leaned over and spoke quietly near his ear. Ashford did not respond. Marcus Webb sat in the gallery with his hands in his lap. When I said the word restitution, he closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then he opened them. His face did not change dramatically, but something around his eyes did. Something that had been very tight, tightened over 6 years of carrying this alone, let go just slightly, just enough. Officer Torres saw it. Sandra saw it. I saw it. Court was adjourned at 12:22 p.m. Marcus Webb stood slowly, picked up his backpack, and started toward the door. I called out from the bench. I said, "Marcus." He stopped and turned. I said, "You did a hard thing today." He said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "Your father would be proud of you." He stood there for a moment without speaking. Then he nodded once, one small, very serious nod, and he walked out through those double doors into the gray March morning. I drove home that evening on Route 9 with the radio off. I thought about what my father used to say when a case had gotten deep inside him. He would say, "The law is not always fast, but it has a long memory. It remembers the people who were brave enough to use it even when they had every reason not to be." Marcus Cole Webb had carried that secret for 6 years, from age 10 to age 16, through losing both parents, through watching his grandmother's letters disappear into a silence designed to confuse her, through sitting in a cafeteria on assistance while across town a man used what was Marcus's to pay for something Marcus never had. He carried it, and then he set it down in the only place with the authority to lift it properly. My father also told me this. He said, "Rules applied without heart stop being justice and become something else entirely, something closer to cruelty with an official stamp on it. I have spent 28 years trying to hold the line where the law serves the person and not the other way around. Some days that is the hardest thing I know how to do. But then a boy walks in alone with a folder he printed for $4.20, and every hard day becomes worth it. We owe each other the truth. We owe each other the courage to speak it, even after years of silence. We owe each other the kind of justice that looks a person in the eye and says, 'I see you, I see what was taken from you, and this room will not look away from it.' I still think about Marcus Webb walking out through those double doors, about that one small, serious nod before he stepped into the cold March air. I hope the law deserved it. I hope I did too. Thank you for sitting with me for this one. Your trust means everything to me.